Hello there and happy Friday. I'm so excited it's Friday. If we haven't met, my name is Julie Hirschberg. I am a neurologic physical therapist, the founder, owner of Reactive Therapy and Wellness here in the Los Angeles area. I actually have my double reactive on today. It's all about the brain. I love our clinic and our team, and just excited as always to come to you and share a little bit about what we're doing, what we're learning, some of the latest evidence and literature about neurologic disorders. And today, as very often, I want to talk about functional neurologic disorders. And I have a very particular reason today, and it is because I heard a story this week from a mom whose child had FND after an accident, and unfortunately had gone through tons of therapy that was really, really inappropriate and made things worse. Now, on a whole, I think therapists are amazing. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, psychologists, and can really, really help people with functional neurologic disorders. But if they're not informed, they can actually make things worse. And that is what happened in this case. So I was just felt really compelled to advocate to my fellow healthcare providers, that's you all, about functional neurologic disorders. So I wanted to share a couple of things. So I've got a couple of graphics here for you. And this is probably the biggest one to start with is, did you know that functional neurologic disorders, they're the second most common neurologic diagnosis in neurology clinics? And I feel like it's the most common one that people don't understand. So, they understand less common diagnoses like ALS, even Huntington's disease. But after headache, so most people also understand headache, functional neurologic disorder is the second most common. So I think it's really imperative that as healthcare providers, we really understand it. And particularly, it has this tumultuous history of being very misunderstood, from, being called hysteria to conversion disorder to psychogenic, all of which we understand is not true now. But we have that history. That's what I learned in physical therapy school, because I went to school 22 years ago. So I think it's the second most, but it's the most misunderstood, and particularly often understood as a purely psychological disorder, which it's not. So I think that's the biggest piece. And what I wanted to hone in on here is I've got another visual. This is a visual I use commonly when I present on functional neurologic disorders, but this is one that is straight from a course that I am doing with my most amazing colleagues at Mass General Hospital, Julie Maggio, Heather Salon, other fellow PTs working in FND, Julie McLean, an OT, and Ellen Godina, who is a psychotherapist. So we put together a presentation for the combined sections meeting of the APTA that's just coming up in a couple of weeks. It's in San Diego. It's a huge conference for physical therapists. We have a one-day course all on functional neurologic disorders. So I'm really excited for that, to spread the word about functional neurologic disorders. And this is one of the slides from the beginning of that talks about what it is and what falls under the umbrella. And I get this question a lot. Well, is this an FND? Is that an FND? So I wanted to talk about it. What is this umbrella? So first, let's talk about the definition. And I really love this one. It's from a recent article by Mark Hallett, where he defined the term functional neurologic disorder. It conveys a condition which the primary pathophysiological process are alterations in functioning of brain networks rather than abnormalities in brain structures. So it is a condition where the pathophysiology is a connection problem, a functioning problem, versus just a purely structural problem. Now, that doesn't mean psychological versus biological or organic versus non-organic. I despise that artificial dualism and line drawn in the sand. It actually doesn't mean that. It means the functioning of the nervous system is very important. And functional neurologic disorders occur when that goes awry. For many reasons, we might see that the function is disrupted. In fact, I talked earlier this week about a really interesting article where people developed functional neurologic symptoms after having deep brain stimulation surgery. So possibly stimulating the brain can cause the emergence of a functional neurologic disorder. So many different reasons this can occur, but it occurs. And it happens. And it makes sense that it happens, actually, because that's how our brain is made. Our brain is made up of lots of networks and lots of interconnections. Now, let's talk about this umbrella. This umbrella is, some of this, I would say, is actually controversial, but these are generally accepted subtypes of functional neurologic disorder. The first one, and this is the one I would say we see most as physical therapists, is a functional movement disorder, so FMD. That's a subtype of a functional neurologic disorder. We also see functional seizures. In the past, these have been called psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, or PNES, now better understood as functional seizures, but they are non-epileptic. They're just not entirely psychogenic. The other is complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. Now, I would say this is a distinct subtype of FND that has really some of its own pathophysiology. We understand there's distinct peripheral changes that can occur in the nervous system, in the autonomic nervous system, in the sensory system. And this one particularly involves pain. Typically, it's after a physical injury. So functional movement disorder, that one's the most common. Oh, I forgot to say, this is something where we would see tremor, myoclonus, dystonia, functional gait difficulties, functional weakness. All of those would occur under functional movement disorder, tremor being the most common. We talked about functional seizures. We talked about CRPS. On the other side of the umbrella, functional cognitive disorders. If you're not familiar with this, I did a series of videos last month because I got just really interested in functional cognitive disorders, and there's some new interesting research on this area. So I would have you take a look at those videos for functional cognitive disorders. By the way, I learn a lot from our neuropsychologists. We have the most amazing neuropsychologist, Dr. Lauren Keats, and she helps us kind of distinguish, like, what is like dementia? What is like a cognitive dysfunction? What's a functional cognitive disorder? Really helpful to have a neuropsychologist help to piece that apart. Also under the umbrella is some of the persistent post-concussion symptoms can actually be due to a functional problem in the brain. That makes sense after concussion. So sometimes we actually might see a functional movement disorder, but some of the other symptoms as well, autonomic and visual, can actually be functional visual symptoms, for example. And again, there are ways to test that out so that you know that it's actually the functional component of the brain versus a structural component. And then one of the most interesting and fascinating disorders that I love working with is persistent perceptual postural dizziness, or 3PD. It is a chronic dizziness that's a functional dizziness disorder. And so in many ways, when you think of this umbrella, from movement disorders to seizures to pain to cognitive disorders to concussion symptoms to 3PD, you can think of many neurologic symptoms could potentially be functional. They're not all functional, right? Like when somebody's dizzy, it doesn't mean they have 3PD. We actually have to test it out. The other thing that, I talk about a lot, but is really interesting with the functional symptoms is oftentimes they're coming alongside another neurologic disorder. So, for example, people with functional neurologic disorders have a high comorbidity with other diseases, other neurologic diseases like migraine. So somebody could have vestibular migraine and 3PD. Migraine's a common one. Parkinson's disease. So somebody could have resting tremor with Parkinson's and have a functional tremor. Stroke is another one. So somebody could have weakness from the stroke and then also have functional paralysis. So it's not to say, what I want to make really clear in functional neurologic disorders is that it's not an all or nothing. I often say this, but we kind of like to live in the gray area where it's like both and instead of either or. So a person may have migraines and the 3PD, may have migraines and functional paralysis, right? And actually I see a lot of, I see a lot of folks that have migraine and functional symptoms. So I think that's really important to consider as a healthcare provider, to not lump all symptoms. So if somebody has an FND, it doesn't mean every single one of their symptoms is a functional neurologic disorder. They might also have an ankle injury that you need to treat. They might also have neural tension. They might have a cervicogenic dizziness. And I think it takes a very skilled provider to be able to piece those pieces apart and treat all of it, treat the whole person. So that's another take home that I just want to say when it comes to functional neurologic disorders and healthcare providers is to take in the whole person, all of the pieces, all of the diagnoses, all of the underlying impairments, and really create a plan with that person that doesn't ignore other symptoms or doesn't just put everything in a functional neurologic disorder box, but treats the person as a whole. That's a hallmark of functional neurologic disorder treatment. So that is one of the reasons, I'm going to just share one more visual here. One of the reasons we created, let's see if I can find it. We created this. So Brittany Kim, one of our fabulous reactive therapists, and actually an ortho PT with a huge neuro heart, created this free guide. And I know I started out this this little chat today, this discussion with talking about a mom who whose son had FND. We did a consult. They were interested in our program, not quite ready. The person's in school and all of that. And I said, hey, take this handout. Don't keep doing things that make it worse. Now, the mom wasn't doing things. She was going to providers that were doing things that were making it worse. So I said, I'm going to equip you, like, take this with you. And by the way, somebody is commenting, that's a great document. Yes, thank you. I think it's phenomenal. Brittany just did a fabulous job making it simple. 10 things that every PT, but this was the ortho PT's guide, should avoid when working with someone with FND. And literally, as his mom described the therapy that was occurring, it was like almost all of the things you should avoid. Now, of course, somebody wouldn't know that, but that's why I'm advocating. Like, I want you to know what not to do. So go download this. You can download it at reactiveeducation.com. It'll get sent to you. I'll show you too. I've got one more piece to show you. There's a few things that we will send out with it that are actually really helpful as a healthcare provider, or if you're a person with FND and just want, You shouldn't have to do this, by the way, okay? I'm sorry that if you have to do this, but you can advocate for yourself. And most people that I know who have F&D are familiar with advocating for themselves. And so I'm just gonna help empower you in that. We all should take a lot of ownership of our own healthcare, but I think it's really unfortunate that a lot of people with less understood diseases have to do this because medical providers are not don't have a lot of knowledge on it. I hope that's not the case, and that's why I'm educating people. But when you get this download, it actually includes this one pager. It's super simple. Top 10 things that you should not do with someone with FND. So this is geared toward a physical therapist. So if you're a person with FND, you could take this with you, right? You could use it to kind of comb through what's been thrown at you, because I think that's the other thing is in social media, online, it's really hard to comb through all of it. This is evidence-based. So this is taken from the research, from clinical experience. We run an FND program. We see hundreds of people a year. This is evidence-based. So you get that 10 things. Then you actually get one of my favorite articles in the world, The Optimal Theory of Motor Learning. And this is not an F&D article, but this is a theoretical article. So by the way, not light reading. This is a tough read. I don't really recommend it for everybody. It took me a long time to get through it, to be honest. But if you are a healthcare provider and you're not familiar with the optimal theory, great read. And it actually goes through a lot of the background literature that built up to this theory of motor control and motor learning and how we can enhance that is directly applicable to FND. So I highly recommend that. And then the third thing that we included in there is the FND consensus articles for PT. So this is an easier read, pretty simple, basic FND consensus guidelines for physical therapists. So every PT should have these things, should be able to use them in functional neurologic disorders. So again, this is available at reactiveeducation.com. If you go to Reactive Education and just scroll slightly, it's kind of the first thing that you can download. We also have, if you are live on Instagram, you can go to the link in the bio and you can put in and you just put your name and email and it sends it right to you. If you're having problems with that, send me a message and we'll make sure that we can get that into your hands, but that should be able to work. But again, I'm here for the healthcare providers, and I'm here for the people with FND that are all of these folks that are really can make huge changes with therapy. So this is why we run a program, an integrated program with PT, OT, psychology, yoga therapy, and fitness. But this is why I'm doing this course as part of CSM for physical therapists, because I think it's really important for all therapists to be really well versed in functional neurologic disorders so that people with FND do not have to advocate so hard, do not have to be misunderstood, and can get the care that they need to truly help get better. So I want to thank you so much for being live here with me today or catching this video later. Here, I'll take this piece off. I'm just so thankful for the community that we have of Reactive and Reactive Education. We have so many great therapists that connect with me every week and share their stories and share their questions. And we have our amazing Brain Bites group, which I'm just in awe of. So many great therapists within that group, which, by the way, you can join the waitlist. We will be opening soon. So if you're a therapist looking for a mentoring community, a community of like-minded therapists working with FND, join our waitlist. You can look at that at reactiveeducation.com/brainbites, by the way. And again, if you're not familiar with F&D, get yourself that free guide, and please share that with other healthcare providers and really get the word out. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today. I really appreciate that. And I hope to catch you. Well, I will. I'll catch you next week. Thanks so much.